we're publishing Exhibit 919, and what I'd like you to do is sort of walk the jury through the concepts of proportionality using 919 demonstrative to explain. You would begin, please.
Okay. If you look on the far left, you see the subject's behavior. It starts off being active aggression, goes down to active resistance, then passive resistance. We'll start at the top being active aggression. So if the subject's behavior is active aggression, then depending on the severity of it, if it could cause serious bodily injury or death, then an officer is allowed to use deadly force. Moving down, if the subject's actions don't meet the deadly force threshold, then an officer is allowed to use a baton. Also, stunning strikes and unconscious neck restraint. Stunning strike is basically a type of force that an officer can use when he is being assaulted to temporarily stun the person so that they can try to control them. Obviously, also the unconscious neck restraint, I believe, is when an officer uses a neck restraint or a carotid restraint to temporarily make the person unconscious. Continually moving down, as the subject's behavior is less aggressive, moving closer to active resistance, you see an officer is allowed to use a CED, which is a conducted electronic device, or what you might be known to know as a taser. And also they can use a chemical aerosol, which you would also maybe know as a pepper spray. If the subject's behavior doesn't meet that threshold, then an officer can utilize a distraction technique. A distraction technique is typically similar to a stunning strike, but in basically a distraction technique is used to temporarily stun the person in order to follow up with another technique to possibly take them down to the ground or use it to control them as well. Obviously, you have a control takedown as well and a conscious neck restraint to control the person based off of their active resistance. Moving down, if the subject's behavior is passive resistance, then an officer can use a joint manipulation or a pressure point or escort holds, and these are probably the most commonly used types of force when officers are in the field. And then lastly, you have verbalization and just an officer's presence when the person is complying or, possibly passively resisting just verbally.
And if no resistance is offered?
Then just your presence.
Sir, do you have an opinion to a degree of reasonable professional certainty to how much force was reasonable for the defendant to use on Mr. Floyd after Mr. Floyd was handcuffed, placed in the prone position, and not resisting?
Yes.
And what is that opinion?
My opinion was that no force should have been used once he was in that position.
I see on this continuum that phrase deadly force. Is deadly force defined?
Yes.
Is it defined in Minneapolis Police Departmental policy?
Yes, it is.
At this time, I'd like to publish Exhibit 216, and if you could move to page 2, calling out the definition of deadly force. And, sir, could you read into the record for the jury what the definition of deadly force is, beginning at force which the actor uses?
Yes. Force which the actor uses with the purpose of causing or which the actor should reasonably know creates a substantial risk of causing death of great bodily harm.
I'd like to now republish Exhibit 254, the composite. And this is the force applied. I'm going to ask you, sir, do you have an opinion to a degree of reasonable professional certainty whether the force used, as shown in Exhibit 254, whether that force being applied then for the restraint period, which you've defined as 9 minutes and 29 seconds, would constitute deadly force?
Yes.
And what is that opinion?
That it would.
Why is that?
Because at the time of the restraint period, Mr. Floyd was not resisting. He was in the prone position. He was handcuffed. He was not attempting to evade. He was not attempting to resist. And the pressure that was being caused by the body weight could cause positional asphyxia, which could cause death.
Is positional asphyxia a known risk in law enforcement?
Yes, it is.
How long have the dangers of positional asphyxia been known?
At least 20 years. I can recall a Department of Justice memo from, I believe, 1995 that discussed it, and I know that I was trained on it in 1995 as well.
And the risk or the danger of positional asphyxia, the worst outcome is death. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And when we talk about positional asphyxia and the risk, is that risk increased with the increase of pressure on the subject?
Yes, so positional asphyxia can occur even if there is no pressure, no body weight on a subject. Just being in that position, and especially being handcuffed, creates a situation where the person has a difficult time breathing, which could cause death. When you add body weight to that, then it just increases the possibility of death.
And what additional weight did you see in your analysis here?
The defendant's body weight, as well as the two other individuals, the two other officers.
One of the other officers appeared to be pressing down on Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Was that Officer King?
Yes.
And what was Officer Lane doing?
He was holding his legs.
You can take that down, please. Sir, in applying the rules of use of force and use of reasonable force, it's the officer has to consider the totality of circumstances. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And one of the circumstances can be the location. That could be important. Is that right?
Yes.
And are you aware that there was a group of bystanders who eventually began to watch the defendant and the other officers use force on Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Now, sir, in your experience with the Los Angeles Police Department and in the areas you were patrolling, have you ever had to use force or apply force or handcuff a suspect in the view of bystanders?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever had to handcuff an unwilling suspect or subject in the view of bystanders?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever had to do so in the presence of a hostile crowd?
Yes, sir.
Could you define a hostile crowd in that context?
I would define hostile crowd in the situations I've been in where the crowd or members of the crowd were threatening and or throwing bottles and rocks at us, at the police.
Have you had that experience?
Yes, sir.
On more than one occasion?
Yes.
Okay. So if I could publish Exhibit 184, and getting back to the circumstances of this case, this appear to be the bystanders that were gathered watching the defendant apply force to Mr. Floyd.
Yes, it does.
When you reviewed the body-worn cameras, did you see anybody throw any rocks or bottles?
No, I did not.
Did you see anyone physically attack the officers?
No, I did not.
Did you hear foul language or name calling?
There was some name calling, yes, but and some foul language, but that was about the most of it.
Did that factor into your analysis?
No.
Why not?
Because I did not perceive them as being a threat.
And why is that?
Because they were merely filming, and most of it was their concern for Mr. Floyd.
And in terms of proportionality in the force continuum, is the officer able to increase the use of force on an individual based on the conduct of some third party over whom the subject has no control?
No, the officers can only use force based on the subject's actions.
Do you acknowledge that loud noise and name calling can in fact be distracting?
Yes, it can be.
What does an experienced and trained officer do in the face of that sort of distraction?
They continue to assess and reassess their force, or they would attempt to lower any type of threat level that they may perceive.
Now, based on your review of the offense materials and the records, as of May 25, 2020, how long had the defendant been a Minneapolis police officer?
Approximately 19 years.
And if we can call out, publish Exhibit 203, and if you could highlight the top portion. These appear to be workforce training records of the defendant, is that right?
Yes.
And it indicates approximately 866 hours?
Yes.
Of paid training?
Yes.
Do you think that should have been sufficient training to prepare the defendant for this distraction?
Absolutely.
You take that down, please. Now, sir, but you do acknowledge that it would be possible for a loud group, to distract a defendant from being attentive to George Floyd. Is that right?
Yes.
Do you believe that occurred?
No, I do not.
Why is that?
Because in the body-worn video, you can hear Mr. Floyd displaying his discomfort and pain, and you can also hear the defendant responding to him.
Now, at this time, I'd like to publish Exhibit 47 and bring us to the body. That's the body-worn camera footage of Lane. Bring us to the point of 20, 22, and 23 seconds. Okay. And at this time, I'd like to publish that and play that section for the jury.
My stomach hurts. My neck hurts. Everything hurts. There's water or something. Please. Please. I can't breathe, officer.
Talking, Bobby, yelling.
They will kill me. They will kill me, man.
Takes a heck of a lot of ammo.
Come on, man.
All right. Is that the exchange that you testified to of the defendant responding to statements of Mr. Floyd?
Yes, sir.
And, sir, approximately how long did the defendant continue to restrain George Floyd after the exchange we just heard?
I believe 6 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.